Welcome to another episode of Cadence Fishing TV. I'm fishing on the River Severn today at Upton and just playing a nice skimmer on a Bolo float. I'm fishing with my great friend and brand ambassador Colin Harvey, and Colin lives in Upton and we've been itching to get out on the river and fish for bream like this on the Bolo. The river's been up for so long, every time we planned to come, the river came up and wrecked our chances, but I've been fishing for about an hour now and this is my third bream. The first two I caught were between 4 and maybe even 6 pounds. They were absolute beauties. This one's probably a couple of pounds. Absolutely fantastic fish. So you can see the river's still a bit up. I think there's about 3 foot of water on the river and it's actually just slightly rising. It's just typical with our luck. The river started to rise a little bit this morning, so we're just hoping that it doesn't come up too much. But what we've decided to do is hedge your bets. I'm fishing this really quite famous peg in Upton on the steps of the Swan pub, and Colin's fishing the peg below. And I mentioned I wanted to fish the Bolo. It's not a method you really associate with catching bream on a river, but it's great fun. And Colin's fishing the feeder so that we're covering our options. If the river does come up, I think the feeder will come into play more than the Bolo, but at the moment I'm absolutely loving catching these fish on the float. Absolutely fantastic. When I was setting up, I spent quite a bit of time plumbing up and just running my float through the swim to try and understand the depths and contours and, more importantly, where the snags are. I've never fished this peg before and I know it's quite a snaggy peg. I think a key feature about it is, perhaps Chappie will be able to see when he looks upstream, but there's a big boat upstream of us and it creates a bit of a slack on our side of the river here. Perhaps it only goes out maybe a quarter, where we've just got a bit steadier flow, and that's obviously why the bream like to hold up and shoal up in this area. And when I worked out an area that I could fish effectively with the float in terms of being able to run it through consistently without snagging up, I put 6 or 7 big balls of ground bait in, laced with casters, to try and pin the fish into one spot. And that's what's happened. I suppose I went about, that was a snag, I went about 20 minutes before I had my first bite, and it was a beautiful bream. And I'm catching the 3 fish I've caught in pretty much the same area. It's an area around about 1 or 2 meters down, and I'm fishing, I don't know, about 25 foot out into the river. Hook bait at the moment, I'm using double red maggot or double fluoro maggot. on a size 16 hook, and it's been great fun hooking and playing the fish on the float. They really fight hard. The big river bream, they're very ponderous how they fight. They use the flow in their favour. I've just taken my time and slowly brought the fish up the peg and been able to net them. So let's hope we get a few more. Well, that feels like another bream. I just had a nice roach, about 8 or 10 ounces, and this is definitely a better fish. What I've found is I'm loose feeding maggots, but I'm also putting the odd ball of ground bait in, and they seem to be coming to it. I think it's perhaps just helping me concentrate the fish on the line that I'm fishing and the little area that I've got. So I'm putting a good sized ball of ground bait packed with casters in, perhaps every sort of 10 minutes. And I'm just taking my time with these fish because they're really fighting well in the flow. Let's have a look at this one. Yeah, that's another nice one. Here he comes. Marvellous. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, that's another one of those nice big bream. I'll just quickly unhook him and hold him up for you. Well, that's definitely been worth waiting for. That's my 4th bream. It's absolutely immaculate. What a lump. I'm really pleased with how the session's going, but as we kind of predicted, the river is coming up. It's come up about 3 or 4 inches while we've been fishing. It's a day and a method where I'm not getting loads of bites, but when I do get a bite, it's a good fish. And I'm really enjoying working it out. It's quite tricky really, trying to present my float correctly in the right spot over the feed and obviously get a bite and a fish in amongst all the snags. The wind's got a bit strong as well in the last 20 minutes, which isn't helping. At the moment I've got a 6 gram Bolo on, and I'm just thinking about maybe stepping up to an 8 gram and a slightly different pattern with more of a shoulder, which might enable me to hold back into the downstream wind a little bit. But it's great fun. Best bait so far has been 3 maggots. And another thing I'm thinking about doing is chopping some worm up and introducing some chopped worm and castor in the ground bait, and maybe trying a worm on the hook as well. The colour's not bad at all. It's a lovely colour. Still a tinge of colour, but I think maybe a bigger bait like a worm might just help to pick up a fish and for the bigger bream to spot it. But I'll keep persevering with the maggot for perhaps another 10 minutes and then have a think about doing that. It might be a better day to fish a feeder, to be honest, but I've been wanting to do this for some time, come and fish a Bolo on the lower Severn and target the bream and the skimmers. And I know it's a method that's worked really well for Colin in the past. He's had some huge weights of roach and bream fishing like this, and I suppose put simply it's just a bit more fun than fishing a feeder. Obviously a feeder is so devastating because you can fish on the bottom, you can feed exactly how much you want, and you can really concentrate the feed in one area. But sometimes it's nice just to fish a float and do something a bit different. What I found to get the bites is I'm having to really slow the bait down, so I'm probably slowing the float down by about half the speed of the current. And obviously you've got to get the right float in terms of its weight to achieve that. If I was using a lighter float, then it would simply just rise up when I held back and pull the bait off the bottom. You know, typically the bream that we're catching, they're going to be feeding on or very near to the bottom, so you need to get your bait and present it in the right way for them. My preferred way of doing it most of the time is just to get the float under control, and then by moving my rod slowly downstream, controlling the path of the float down through the swim. So I'll just show you that by just moving the rod down, I'm slowing the float right down, and then when I get to the end of that sweep, if you like, I can just bring the rod back round and then repeat the process. Every so often you get a bite and it's the bottom, but that's the sort of pattern for today. I'm having to fish hard on the bottom and work my way sort of around the snags, and every so often you hook one, and most of the time I don't lose the hook, but I might bend the hook slightly out of shape. So really with the feeding, I'm just trying to, I am loose feeding, but I've started to cut back on that now as the river's starting to come up, because originally I was thinking with the loose feed, hopefully that would attract fish onto the line that I'm fishing, and I was thinking I might catch a few roach as well, but I've only actually had one roach, and the bream are definitely responding to the balls of ground bait that I'm putting in. So the ground bait I'm using is heavy enough to get down to the bottom really quite quickly and disperse the feed on the bottom, and it looks to me like the bream that are in the swim are homing in on those balls of ground bait, and then it's just a matter of obviously trying to get your hook bait in amongst it as the bream rather are sort of grazing and feeding over that area. One thing that you will notice is I suppose the area I'm catching on in terms of the length of my peg is about 2/3 down the peg. It'd be nigh on impossible to feed higher up the peg and present your float properly over the top. By feeding the balls of ground bait at least halfway or 2/3 down my swim, it's enabling me to hopefully get the feed in position and the optimum position for me to present the float over the top. I'll see if I can show you now, if I show you the kind of balls I'm putting in. I'm putting in a decent sized ball like that, which has got plenty of casters in, and then putting it out on the line of my float. You can just see where my float was, and now try and run my float over the top of that ball of ground bait. I'm going to try 2 reds and a fluoro maggot from a hook bait. I'm having to fish quite heavy really, because obviously they're decent fish and it's powerful flow. So I'm fishing with a 16 hook on an 0.13 hook length now, which would be around about 3.5 4 pound breaking strain. I started off on 0.12 and an 18 hook, and I did get the first bream out, but I must say I was twitching a little bit. That's the bottom again. So I just find if I don't go quite far enough out, I'm catching a few snags. So in my mind, it's almost like the ledge is going, I'm almost fishing on the bottom of the ledge, and if I don't get far enough out, I'm catching a few snags that are maybe caught up on that ledge. Another factor to mention with this tactic is the fact that I'm using a long rod. It's our CR10 18 foot number 2, and being 18 foot in length really helps when you're controlling a bolo like this and slowing it right down, because obviously you can get the control so much easier than if you're using a shorter rod. It's quite deep where I'm fishing. It's got to be 12 foot deep, certainly 10 foot deep anyway, and the 18 foot rod just makes the job so much easier. If the river wasn't so high, I'd have probably fished another sort of good rod length out into the flow. I think that would have helped me get even further past the snags, but given the fact that it's really quite powerful today, I felt that that was going to be a bit too far out, and I think it's right. I think the bream have just sort of swung round into this slightly slacker water, and it's just a matter of persevering. That, you know, you don't need to catch a lot of fish when they're this size. Just keep going really, keep persevering. Well, I'm going to try a few balls of feed, including some chopped worm and casters. And just quickly on the mix, it's 1/3 brown crumb, 1/3 bait tech bream, and then 1/3 crushed hemp, which is a mix I love when I'm fishing like this. It's quite sticky. The crushed hemp helps with that, and it's a lovely mix. It's a rich mix, and one that I can introduce into the swim really easily, and it will carry a lot of feed. So let's put a good amount of chopworm and castor in that, and I'm gonna mix that up and put 2 or 3 balls in. I haven't had a bite now for about 20 minutes, half an hour, so let's see if this will just bring some fish back on the feed. Well, it looks like being positive with that ground bait and chopped worms done the trick. I've got another nice bream on. I also went about another 8 inches over depth and really held the float back. I think the river's just paced up a little bit as it's come up. And this is another nice bream. When I'm fishing bigger hooks and heavier lines like this, I do prefer the 18-foot number 2 over the number 1. And you could use the number 1 today, but just a little bit of extra power with the number 2 really helps when you're playing hard fighting fish like this bream in the flow. Still got a lovely action. You can see the rod's bent and just absorbing all the lunges of the fish beautifully. Here he comes. Oh, look at that beautiful slab. It's got to be 4 or 5 pound, that one. You notice that they're quite pale in colour, and I think that's due to the fact that the river's been up for so long. Obviously normally they'd be much more bronze than that, but I'll get him back in the net. What a wonderful session on the Bolo. Had that one on 3 maggots, so I'm going to try 2 reds and a fluoro. I do like using a fluoro maggot or a fluoro pinky. It seems to, I don't know whether it's a bit of a target for the fish, but seems to work well for me, and it's working today. So I'm just putting 2 red maggots on, and as pretty much whenever I'm putting more than 1 maggot on the hook, I always hook them through the tail, and I'll just show you. So I've tipped it off with a fluoro maggot, and it's great that my local tackle shop lanes sell fluoro maggots now. I'd be absolutely lost without them, particularly when I'm fishing in the winter. Right, let's see if we can get another one. Right, well, I'm going to change the size of my float and just increase it from 6 gram to 8 gram, but I'll just show you the rig that I'm using. So, as I always say when I'm bolo fishing, I want to keep it simple. I've got a bulk there of AA, shot and BB. So this is on the 6 gram float. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 AAs, 2 BBs, and I've got a few number 8 trim shot below, and then I've just spaced 2 number 8s, 2 number 8s, 2 number 8s, and then I've got my hook length. So I'm not having to cast the bolo far. It's easy just to underarm it into position, feather the line so it doesn't tangle. And I think what that's doing is that's giving me the great bulk to get the bait down, to control the float, and I've got these dropper shot that will just hopefully just help the hook bait settle near the bottom or on the bottom as I'm working the float down the peg. And this is the pattern of float that I've started on. I'll just pull it down and show you. So that's a 6 gram Bolo. It's got a carbon stem, nice streamlined shape, which I really prefer when I'm Bolo fishing for most of the time, because it just strikes so cleanly out the water. You don't tend to bump fish off. But having said that, I'm going to change over to this Dave Harrell pattern, which has got a much more pronounced shoulder, and by increasing up to 8 gram, I think this float's going to enable me to present the bait a bit better now that it's paced up as the river starts to rise. So I'm just going to simply swap that over. Main line I'm using today is 019 Pro Gold, and the hook length I'm using is this 013 6 Vest Pro, which I think I mentioned is probably about 3.5–4 pound. The hooks I've settled on are these Sensus hooks, are 3180 BZ in a size 16, and it's a big 16. That's more like a 14 in my mind, but it's a really nice strong sharp hook. And as I mentioned, you know, we're fishing in quite powerful flows, so you need a decent hook. So I'll just get this set up. Obviously I'm going to need to add some shot to increase the capacity. I really favour using shot as a bulk now over olivettes. I find, for one, I don't get as many tangles. Two, I think you get a much better presentation. Maybe the string of shot's more streamlined than a big olivette. And three, like in this situation, I know that an AA shot is around about 0.8 of a gram. So to switch from 6 to 8 gram, all I need to do is add a couple of AA shot to that bulk, and I haven't had to break the rig down or anything or change anything over. I'm just utilising the same rig and just adapting it. So I'll just put a couple of AA shot on. There you go, I've added a couple of more AAs onto the line, onto the bulk. I try and line them up as best I can like that, and I favour these Dinsmore twin cut shot, obviously non-toxic, but they seem to move easier on the line and don't damage the line like other non-toxic shot can. So we'll see if this makes a difference, and like before, if I find I'm not getting any bites, I'm going to be bold in my feeding and put 3 or 4 big balls of ground bait back out there, see if we can attract the bream back to where we're fishing. Well, what a great session this has turned out to be, catching these beautiful bream on the Bolo. I just attacked the peg again with another 4 balls of ground bait and fished the heavier float as the rivers come up, and I'm just playing another beautiful bream. So I'm just taking my time, just bringing it up the peg. I'm not seeing it yet, but this one's really fighting. I think we're going to call this the last fish. Just try and get him in, and the next thing I'm looking forward to is catching up with Colin and having a nice pint in the pub. Just nodding his head all the way back up. I'm just keeping the pressure on and try and get him upstream of me before I try and net him. Here he is. Once. Way, fantastic. What a proper slab. What a wonderful way to end the session. What a fantastic net of bream. All taken from the River Severn at Upton and on a Bolo float. I've thoroughly enjoyed that. Let's get the fish back. We'll go and see Colin and I'm going to have a nice pint. Hopefully they'll swim up. There you go. There's a nice one. Well, Col, I've thoroughly enjoyed that. We started the day off with the most amazing breakfast in the Swan.
Ralph's breakfast is to die for, James. It's always the best.
And we're finishing off with a lovely pint of Guinness.
And that's to die for as well. Can't beat a pint of Guinness.
So obviously, I've thoroughly enjoyed that, catching those bream on the Bolo. We've been planning it for months, haven't we?
Yep.
Every time it was just dropping right, the river's come up, and it's almost messed us up today, but we got away with it.
We got away with it today, yeah. The river's rising quite fast now, and I think tomorrow it'll be unfishable again, so...
Typical, eh?
Yeah, a small window of opportunity, and you've got to take it now and again.
Absolutely, but tell us about your day. I know you fished the feeder a bit further downstream. What did you catch?
Yeah, it was a sort of an interesting day. Believe it or not, I couldn't catch on a worm. I caught on a big bunch of maggots on a 10 hook in the end. I've had 6 bream, but the nice thing was I've had one of Upton's absolute slabs.
Yeah, Chappie, show me his shot there. What an absolute beast
yeah,
that is.
It's between 8 and 9 pounds. Yeah. We didn't weigh it because we didn't want to keep it at the water any longer.
No.
But,
so I think in summary, it's shown, you know, 2 different tactics on the river today have worked well.
Yeah, and there's a fabulous spot just here. There's so many bream. Even in those poor conditions, we can catch 16, 17 bream between us. Unbelievable.
Absolutely great. So I've got to say a big thanks to Upton Club.
Yeah, and a big thanks to Ralph and Sue at the Swan for hosting us for the day.
Yeah, it's been absolutely great. So can't wait to get out again on the river, and let's hope it's soon.
Absolutely, mate, and cheers.
Cheers, Cole. Thanks for all your help.
Here's to the next day.
And thanks for watching.